all you hear online is like, well, Erik Karlsson might be available. What are you going to do there?
How would that possibly be linked to the Leafs, right? Like Mike Greer, the GM of San Jose, I guess is speaking right now. And I've just seen a quote, this is Mike Greer, the GM of the Sharks. For people who think we're going to eat 50% of his contract, Erik Karlsson, and all this type of stuff, it's probably not going to happen, end quote.
But you know what it is? They have to respond to jackasses online that create trades. So
why do they have to do that?
Because what'll happen?
People are going to ask them about
the reporters that are sitting in Nashville going, "Well, is there any truth to this online report?" And they're saying, "No, it's a guy with 7 followers that created a trade, and now you've got to answer to this question."
But isn't that the National Hockey League and the way they do business in a nutshell? That last night the guy wins a Norris. And today, his GM's like, we're not eating 50% of his contract to get rid of this guy. Yeah. And honestly, he's a much better player than Ryan Johansson, much better player than Kevin Hayes.
Right.
But can they really expect anything in return? I don't think you can. In this
at 100%, like if they send 100% of the contract
Philly
out,
ate money, Nashville ate money. They got nothing in return.
They got to turn him into a $9 million player.
But even then, Frankie, what do you think you're getting for Erik Karlsson?
You have to get, honestly,
Then keep him.
But I'm saying, if I'm a team that thinks they're a defenseman away from being turning a corner, and I could get him as an $8 million defenseman, would you give up multiple high picks, a prospect in him?
I'm not sure you have to, because I don't know if there's a market out there.
I heard the Carolina Hurricanes. They said the Carolina Hurricanes, how good did Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson work for the San Jose Sharks before? Why would you do that again?
Well, because they were there in the wrong time. What I'm saying, Erik Karlsson flourished the minute that Brent Burns was there. They were eating into each other.
Yeah, that's why. Why would you go down that road again? He's got to be a standalone, pure offensive guy around a pretty good decor of some solid guys around him, and let him just run wild.
Yeah, that's what he does best.
And that's okay. Now your teams have dwindled even more.
I'm just saying.
I don't think they're. Put it this way: I'm sure Greer wants to move him. But they're not in the business of just handing him away. He's probably doesn't have a mandate from the owners. You got to cut $11 million off your payroll because we're going to rebuild.
I think I agree with you. I don't believe that'll be the case because there's a floor. They got to spend a certain amount of money anyway, and they committed to the guy. What I'm saying is, what Karlsson represents today is not representative of where San Jose is in terms of their build and what they're building towards. They're building towards 3-5 years down the road, which means Karlsson, he doesn't fit. Right?
No, I get that. I understand that. But if you were a team that was desperate for him, would you give 2 first-rounders for him to make him an $8 million defenseman?
I think it would. I think you need more context. I think it depends on what team you're talking about, how close they are, and also, again, what the rest of the market is.
Right.
That's what I'm saying there. You don't want him, But
who are you negotiating against? Again, using Kevin Hayes and Ryan Johansson, who are different players, but good players can be effective. I think Hayes can still play.
One guy had 100 points and won the Norris last night. Those guys aren't even in the same stratosphere.
Right, but they got Alex Galchenyuk in a 6th rounder. Okay, are they? It's not what I'm saying is they're not terrible. Right. It's that their contracts are so onerous that teams are like, this is what we can give you, man. Right. Take it or leave it if you want it.
Yeah.
I just don't believe there's going to be a massive bidding war for a guy who's got, I think, 4 years left at $11 million.
I think teams might worry.
It's just a massive amount of and he's been up and down the last 4 or 5 years. That's the thing.
Don't you worry? Okay, it's 101 points. It's a brilliant year. It's outstanding. It's Norris worthy. All that kind of stuff. You think there's a little part in the back of their head that's man, if we pull this off and we bring this guy in, he better not go back to the 50-point guy.
I don't think he was healthy.
No, I know he's not
for
healthy.
A guy who makes $11 million here. Nobody even talks about that. He had 80 points.
Who, Matthews?
No. The captain.
Oh, Tavares? Yeah.
That's just that's forgotten.
What is forgotten?
That John Tavares makes $11 million. Who's a better player? Karlsson? Would you rather have Karlsson at 11 or would you rather have John Tavares?
The Karlsson of last year, clearly I would take Karlsson. The Karlsson of 2 or 3 years ago?
Norrises.
Yeah, but no, man. That's irrelevant, though, now.
He
won 2 of them.
Irrelevant. He won it last night.
He won 2 of them 10 years ago, though.
Doesn't matter.
It does matter. Carey Price has won Vestas. Would you take him or would you take Shesterkin?
Not even 24 hours ago, this guy was the best defenseman in the league.
Then why can't he be flipped? Why wasn't he flipped at the deadline? Because he's got a contract like Roberto Luongo's. His contract sucks. He's got
sucks.
Dude, 11
and a half.
11 million for
man.
100 points.
I understand that, Noodles. I understand what he is. But I think it's clearly a buyer's market. And there are teams out there that are like, we don't have a lot of flexibility. So if you want to eat a lot of it, we'll take it on. That appears to be the viewpoint of the league right now.
You'll take on Kevin Hayes' onerous contract.
At 50%.
Erik Karlsson is not, like, that's not onerous. The guy actually earned $11 million last year.
He absolutely did.
So that's where I don't want us to lose sight of that. Like, that's
You're
what
right
I'm trying
about
to say.
I'm not disputing that last year he gave you $11 million plus worth of value.
What if you trade for him and he gets 80 points?
Good
That's
player.
A point-a-game player as a
very,
defenseman.
very happy with that.
And he probably makes your team a lot better depending on what your team is. So I just, like, we're arguing that maybe William Nylander gets 10. And Erik Karlsson won the Norris and got 100 points as a defenseman.
He had 74 even strength points last year. If you just count that, that's a tremendous year and a big bounce back. It was an unbelievable year. But I will say, like, I am with you, Hayes, where it's like a little weary to bring in $11.5 million on a guy. I know he's healthy now, but
yes,
there's always that chance. You're always thinking about it. You're like, man, you got to have some stones to pull off a move like that. You're going to mortgage some of your futures, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, if it works, it's great. You're going to look like a genius. You're going to be looking at the guy that brought in Erik Karlsson. He still had 80, 90 points.
Okay, but my point is you're not bringing him in as an $11 million player. You're bringing him in as an 8. What would you pay for an 8? Your number one right now makes 8.
In Morgan Riley.
Morgan Riley.
Yeah.
Who's a better player?
Erik Karlsson at 8.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say is, would I pay a king's ransom for a number one defenseman that most teams would covet for $8 million a year? At 33, yes. And yes, there's been injuries and, I get it. But like, I'm not looking at 11.5. I'm looking at 8.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you got to hope Greer
like
retain
Dmitry Orlov might get something crazy as a free agent.
I think his is going to start with a 7.
Okay, so
I think he's going to start with a 7.
That's what I'm saying. Orlov at 7 or Karlsson at 8.
Orlov at 7 is a little overpaid for me. It's rich, yes.
But like this is what I'm talking about. Like I think this is a great debate because I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I'm also saying, like, this isn't. Kevin Hayes has never been known as a top 50 player. Neither is Ryan Johansson. Erik Karlsson's been known. There was times on this show we were like, this guy's the third best player on the planet.
Exactly. That was in like 2016. There were times when Bob won Vesnas. Would you take him at 10.5?
I was fine with him at $10 million. Weeks ago.
He was for a month and a half. Did you go back to the well now for the rest of the deal?
I don't know.
That's the thing. Everything resets. That's all I'm saying is, yes, it was phenomenal this year. Right. Now it resets, and you've got it for another, 4 years on top. And
I think people have to look at context. You're right. Like, we're digging into the numbers. We're digging into everything. And yes, there won a Norris, but he also won a Norris last night.
Yes.
He didn't win one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
he had a phenomenal season.
Exactly.
So,
no one can take that away from him. It was an unbelievable year. It was 101 points. It was brilliant.
I think there should be teams that should be putting their hand up and saying, if I can get Erik Karlsson at something with an 8 in it, I'm all in on that. Because as we saw in the playoffs, especially those two teams that were in the finals, D was at a premium. Top defensemen were at a premium. Shea Theodore, Alex Pietrangelo. I would argue that Karlsson, different players.
They're different. That's the thing.
Yes.
It's the identity, too, because if you're bringing in Karlsson and you have your like 1A guy, like, I'll use this example. The Pittsburgh Penguins have Chris Letang. So do you need to bring in Eric? Do you need to pay a king's ransom to bring in Erik Karlsson when you already have Chris Letang? That's where I'm coming from. Where that your teams dwindle now when you look at who has that player in a lesser version offensively, but that's your guy already.
Well, there's only so many teams that are going to acquire this guy. That's what I'm saying is that you can cut off probably 20 teams that are like, it just doesn't make sense for us to do it, right? Like, Montreal's not acquiring Erik Karlsson. Arizona's not going to do it. Like, there's like Anaheim's not doing it. You can cut off 20 teams. So then all of a sudden you get to the next 11. Probably a handful of those either have number ones or like are so up against the cap, they're like, we just can't make this work.
Right.
That's all I'm saying is it gets to a point where there's a very small market size for them where how much do you really feel you have to pay to acquire him? Where I would suggest San Jose is in a position where they really need to flip him now. Like you gotta make sure you pay off on the fact that he won the Norris last year.
Right.
Because if he shows up next year, gets hurt, or it dips, then they're really screwed.
Right.
So I don't know. Listen, I love him as a player. I'm not down on Karlsson.
I think there's
I'm
two
just
teams
saying.
in Canada that should be all in on him.
Do you think the Leafs should be all in on him?
I think the Leafs and I think the Oilers should look at him. Now,
If the Leafs were all in on him, even at 8, and that means, probably Morgan Riley's got to go the other way.
Yeah.
Or TJ Brody.
But then
or
you got to
McCabe.
Then you got to throw in something for the
or
future
Jake
for
Muzzin's
San Jose.
LTIR situation, that's 5.5 there.
If I'm San Jose, I'm like, okay, you want to send me TJ Brody? I like Matthew Nyes. I want him.
What I'm saying
That's
is,
the thing. You're not paying that.
no, you're not. But what I'm saying is, if you are getting them to chew on salary, like I'm not trying to create a trade. What I'm trying to say is,
Toronto is linked to him.
what I'm saying is, what would it look like, or how would you make that work? You've got Jake Muzzin's LTIR situation, so that would get them to the floor on situation. Like that would have to go out.
Yeah.
So that's 5.5 right there.
Right.
So now you got to find 2.5, $3 million. That's Alex Kerfoot's contract,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It's doable if you want to do it. And
can
again,
be doable.
And that's
Now,
just looking at, and then what do you have to give for that contract
Right.
is the question.
It also may affect, if you can bring back Nylander at a certain price.
Right.
Right. Because you're talking about a 4-year commitment.
Yep.
And listen, if you're going to get the guy who won the Norris at $8 million, obviously that is something every team should look at and say, I'll take it.
That's all I was saying.
Of course
That's
you
all
should.
I was saying.
And I'm not arguing with that. I don't know what you're going to get the rest of the way. It is a big commitment. And I don't think the team acquiring has to pay as much as people think based on what else is going in the league, around the league. That's why I'm using the other examples. I'm not putting them in the same category.
Right.
I'm saying they were literally just dumps.
Well, and Taylor Hall was a salary
And
dump.
Taylor Hall was just, you got to go.
I understand
Like, those
that.
are good players. They're not great players necessarily, but they're legit players who it's like, we'll eat money and just get out the door.